Hey adventurers, so today is going to be my spoiler discussion, spoiler thoughts, whatever I'm calling it, on episode 8 of The Rings of Power, or this is also the finale of the episode, or the finale of season 1. Whew, oh boy. First off, the title is Alloyed. I did manage to remember to get the title of the episode, so that's good. I remembered that. Alloyed, of course, gives you lots of, if you know what the word means, which is a combination of a metal and something else to make a different sort of metal. And so if you know what that description, or what that word means, what alloy means, then you can kind of guess where this episode is going. And that's a little bit unfortunate. Anyways, let's get into it. So, as always, I just wrote down my thoughts as I saw them in the episode. And we'll continue from there. So it starts out following the stranger, and then he gets found by the Mystics, because somehow they teleported to his location. And anyways, so he gets found by the Mystics, and they call him, talk to him, and they're like, "We're ready to follow you and serve you, Lord Sauron." And my first thought is, he's not Sauron. I know for a fact that he's not Sauron. Based on everything else that's set up, I just know that it's not him. And it's not. It turns out, nope, he's not Sauron. So, anyways, the stranger isn't Sauron. It's my first thought. I don't buy it that wounded Halbrand could gallop like that. So, we see a shot of Galadriel and Halbrand on their horses, having teleported from Mordor to, or from just outside Mordor to Eregion, because everybody teleports in this show. Anyway, so we see them teleporting or having teleported, and then they're galloping full speed towards Eregion. And I'm just, last we saw of Halbrand, he's got this massive gash up his I don't know what side it is, I think it's his left side. Anyways, he's got a massive gash in his chest. And all I can think of is, he can't be galloping. There's no way that he's got enough strength, especially if they didn't teleport. If they had actually ridden from just outside Mordor all the way to Eregion, that's a very long ways to go. And he would not have had the strength. Anyways, so I didn't buy that wounded Halbrand could gallop like that. But then the very next shot we see that, oh no, he's not galloping, he's just slumped over, basically dead on his horse, and Galadriel's leading the horse. So then I say, okay, so they're galloping because he's about to die and they need to be quick. Reasonable explanation. I also write down, rather convenient that they arrive while Elrond and Celebrimbor are standing outside to meet them. They have no knowledge that Galadriel and Halbrand are coming. Nobody knows, because Galadriel is, as far as the elves know, Galadriel is in Valinor. So the Elrond and Celebrimbor are just conveniently standing there, blah 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 blah, talking about all their stuff, and then in rides Galadriel and Halbrand, and Elrond's like, "Galadriel, how are you here?" And you just like, why? How is it so conveniently timed? It would make far more sense if Elrond and Celebrimbor had been in the forge and were talking, discussing, looking, trying to figure some stuff out, and then somebody runs in and is like, "Lord Celebrimbor, Galadriel, the Lady Galadriel has arrived," or something like that, and then they rush out. That would be believable. But just having them standing outside conveniently for them to meet each other right there, it doesn't make sense. Then we're in I don't know, a dormitory, or what's it called? I don't know. They're trying to heal. There's elven healers trying to heal Halbrand. And Galadriel and Elrond are standing out looking into this room for whatever reason. And Elrond asks, "How is it you are here?" And Galadriel turns to him and asks, "How is it you are here?" And I'm like, one of those questions is very easily answered. The other one makes no sense So, the last thing that Elrond knew was Galadriel had been sent to Valinor. That's all he knew about Galadriel. And so, he's still in Middle-earth. It would make perfect sense for over the however long it's been since Galadriel and Elrond had last seen each other. It would make perfect sense that Elrond could leave Lindon and go to Eregion. How is it you're here? I walked. It's perfectly reasonable. That's not a question that Galadriel needs answered. It makes no sense for why she would ask that question. So that got another facepalm emoji from me. How long has it actually been? Because the "I have missed you" makes it seem like a long time, but Elrond didn't even realize that 20 years away from Durin was long. So again, they're talking, and Elrond says to Galadriel, I have missed you. You know, like somebody who hasn't seen their best friend in years. Except that Elrond just, in episode 2, or I think it was episode 2, he said it's only been like 20 years or something like that to Durin. And Durin got all mad at him, and then he realized, oh, I guess that is kind of a long time. It's been less time than that from what it seems like in this show. I mean, it seems like this show took place in about a month, over the course of about a month, and for Elrond to say, I have missed you, to Galadriel, the elves don't understand time in the same way that we do. It just, again, it doesn't make sense. Then Halbrand somehow is up and walking around and comes down into the forge, and he's like, what is this place or something? And Celebrimbor standing there. This was the workshop of Celebrimbor or something like that. And so Halbrand's like, is he here? The Celebrimbor? Is he here? And anyways, whatever happens, Halbrand doesn't know Celebrimbor. And so basically he finds out, or he wants to find out if Celebrimbor is there. And so Celebrimbor pulls the string and opens the window, or opens the roof up, and Halbrand's like, you're Celebrimbor? And I'm like, how does pulling one string, opening a window, or opening the roof that everybody who's ever worked in the workshop would know how to do, how does that tell you that you're Celebrimbor? It's like, not really. That one got a facepalm emoji from me too. I'm rather free with my facepalm emojis, by the way. And then it switches to Numenor. And I didn't realize that it was Numenor until I heard the voice talking, and the way that they were talking about it. It sounded a little bit like Farazan, and it sounded like Numenor was being talked about, and like Tar Palantir was being talked about and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, so maybe we're in Numenor, and they're just doing a weird voiceover cut to Numenor in a second here. But that's not what they were doing. They had already cut to Numenor, but there's this tower in Numenor that looks exactly the same as the tower in Eregion. And so you can't visually tell the difference between the two based on that tower alone. And that was the focal point of the shot. And so your eyes are drawn to that shot. You don't see the little castle tomb, whatever thingy over here with the rounded roof thingy. Like, you don't see any of that. And all you see is this one tower. That's the first thing you notice. And so you think, oh, we're still in Eregion. They're just doing another establishing shot in Eregion for some reason. But it's not. It's Numenor, and you can't tell the difference between them. I wrote down that I like that Palantir is wearing the jewel. I also wrote down, find out what the jewel's name is, because I couldn't remember. Basically, there's this jewel that some of the kings of Numenor wore that was a white jewel just on the forehead with a mithril fillet that was holding it on, basically like a tiara or crown type thing. And symbol of kingship, symbol of nobility, but not an actual crown. It's not what gave them the power to rule type thing. It's just a symbol. And then, so I'm like, I like that he's wearing the jewel. And then I got to thinking about it, and I specifically wanted to get the name of the jewel and everything and figure out what it was called, because I remember it being referenced in Lord of the Rings, at least at one point, several times in Lord of the Rings, and then it's referenced in Unfinished Tales. And so I wanted to remember what that jewel was called, and so I googled it, and it's the Elendil Mirror, or the Star of Elendil, or the Star of the North, or the Star of the North Kingdom. Several different names for the jewel. But then I got to thinking, like, why does Tar Palantir have it, when Tar Palantir is not of the lineage of that king, that line of kings from... It's actually Elendil the First made it for his daughter, and I can't remember what his daughter's, Silmarion, I think is his daughter's name. And then it gets passed on down the line to Elendil the Second, I believe is who it is, unless I've got those mixed up, and it's Elendil the Second makes it for his daughter, and then it's passed down to Elendil the Third. Whatever the case, it goes from Elendil to Silmarion and passes down the line to Elendil, father of Isildur and Anarion. Yeah, that's right. So I'm thinking, why does he have that jewel? Because he wouldn't have that jewel. He's not of that lineage, and maybe that's not what it was supposed to be, but that's what it looked like. And then Palantir wakes up, and just so happens that he wakes up when Aarion is in there, and he starts talking, thinking that Arian is Miriel, and so he says something about, I looked into it for too long and now I can't distinguish what is past, what is future, and what is present, or something like that. And obviously referring to the Palantir stone that he has up higher in the tower. And so I'm going to just have to go a little bit more rapidly through this, and hopefully that you guys can still hear everything okay. Anyway, so Palantir's, my thought is, so Palantir's power of foresight came from looking into the Palantir for too long. That's not how it works. Again, I've already discussed in previous episodes about the Palantir and how the Palantir works, what the lore of the Palantirs are, and basically you don't get, I mean, Denethor was corrupted, but that was because he was communicating with Sauron through it and thinking that he could fight Sauron's will, which obviously he can't. So again, Tar Palantir stuff doesn't make sense. And I wrote down, they got a change of clothes. I don't know who it was that got a change of clothes. Probably Galadriel, Celebrimbor, who's the other guy? Halbrand. Probably those are the three people I was referring to, because they did, and Galadriel's dress is again very pretty. And then I see, why does Gil-galad look down on humanity, especially those not of Numenorian descent, is the thought that I wrote down. And I'm just thinking, like, because he says at one point, the Lowlander King? Or something, and just like the spite in his voice towards them, I'm like, Gil-galad is the High King of the elves. He doesn't care. He doesn't think about the humans in that way. None of the elves think of the humans in that way. Even the not Numenorian humans. And it just like, why does Gil-galad have to be such a jerk? How is Halbrand already healed enough to work? They've been in Numenor for like days, or not even days, and for like hours, and so he's now healed enough to work, but he was like, doesn't make sense if he was a human, even with the elven medicine. Galadriel requests that, she's talking to somebody in another elf in Eregion, and she's like, I want anything that you have on the history of the kings of the Southlands type thing. And so he's like, I will have to scour the catacombs. And like, he doesn't want to do all this, like it's going to take up his precious little time. And all I can think of is the elves are immortal. Time doesn't matter to them. Scouring the catacombs, it's not going to take that long for him to do in the long run of things. So I'm just like, why is this your go-to response that of, I don't want to do this? This is Galadriel. She's one of the most important characters in the Legendarium, and you're treating her like your I don't know, like your dad maybe, or your mom or something, and you're just like mad at her. I don't understand this. The hobbits move fast, so again, hobbits are teleporting. They decide to, so in the end of the last episode, they decided to go off and follow the stranger. They also teleported because the stranger teleported, and then the mystics teleported, and so the hobbits had to teleport too in order to be there on time. And then they're sneaking around, and I say, why are the hobbits so loud? It's just like, the hobbits, that's one of their main things, is they can move near silently, silenter than the elves can, and not be seen if they don't want to. And yet, like, they're walking and thump, 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 crunch leaf, and I'm like, you're not very good at sneaking if I can hear you. Then I wrote down, what's the point in killing Sadek? Because one of the, I think they called her the Nomad or something in this episode, and it was, she threw her spinny Moon Knight weapon thingy, and it stuck into Sadek's chest, and he fell over dead. And all I can think of is, why did you kill Sadek here? What's the point in that? Like, it served no purpose to the story at all. There's no purpose in your killing him. Oh, and then guess what? Sadek's not dead? Because he, like, pops up and stabs the lady in the foot with her own thing, and there's no wound on him anywhere, and I'm just like, I'm so confused. You just killed him, and now he's alive again? This isn't how hobbits work. Hobbits still die if you hurt them, if you kill them. And I wrote down, why is there fire where the mystic creep hasn't blown it, and it hasn't had time to spread? So we see her blow this way, and then that way, and then this way, but then it looks out, and everything is covered in fire, and I'm like, the fire would not have had that time to spread that far between the and the switch out. Time. All right. And then it showed they get done with that battle. That battle's stupid with the stuff with the staff, magic staff, and everything. It's just a dumb battle. And then the stranger learns, takes the staff and blows all the 3 creeps away, mystics away, and melts them, and they turn into soul butterflies or something like that. And it's just like, what is the purpose of this? But they also, before that, they make them look like they're Nazgul, which then makes me think, oh great. So the Witch King is no longer a king, but a queen, and they're making this creepy mystic lady the Witch King. Wonderful. Another brilliant place to break the lore there. And then it shows Sadek sitting down, and he's like, oh, and he's all old and looks like he's dying, and it's because he does have a wound, but it's down in his stomach and his gut rather than up in his chest where he got hurt in the first place. Ugh. And so my thought there, what I wrote down there is just, that's not where Sadek was wounded. And then we get back to the Hobbit, we teleport back to Hobbitland, to the Grove or whatever, which I don't understand anything about how this all works, because it makes no sense, the travel. And anyways, so it says, I wrote down, how does the stranger know that Istar means wizard? I can believe wise one, but when have they had the opportunity or reason to use wizard in their speech? So they get away with it or they don't get away with it. What is I'm looking for? They try to explain it. They attempt to explain it by having the mystics be talking to the stranger and trying to convince him and to teach him things. And so that's unlocking his memories and his thoughts and his ability to think more and stuff like that. That's what they're trying to say with it anyways. And so, but from the beginning of the series, it's been Nori trying to teach the stranger how to speak and how to communicate, and she's done really good, and he's gotten to where he can haltingly communicate. And so when he says Istar, in your language that means wise one, I can understand that, but I can't understand, because wise and one, or wise one, that phrase, there's a possibility that could have been used, or at least that would have come up and she would have had an opportunity to teach him those words and how to use them. That makes sense. But wizard is a very specific word, one that the hobbits wouldn't understand it's not a word that the hobbits would have understood at that moment without having a reference of what a wizard was. And so the hobbits knew what a wizard was in Lord of the Rings because they knew of Gandalf. They'd heard rumors of Gandalf. This is a wizard. He makes fireworks. That's what they thought of the wizards type of stuff. But at this point in the timeline, they wouldn't be wizards yet. Wise ones or travelers or something along those lines would make sense, or the stranger would make sense. But wizard just doesn't work in that context. And so I'm just wondering how the stranger would have known the word wizard, and how Nori would have known to teach him that word, and what use would she have had for that word to him, and just lots of stuff like that. And then I wrote down, the Elven Rings were not the first to be forged. The Elven Rings were actually the last to be forged. I might be wrong about this, but I believe the Elven Rings were actually forged after, I think I'm wrong. I think the 3 Elven Rings were forged before the One Ring, but it was after Sauron was kicked out. And so there's actually probably more than 20 rings that were forged, but they were all made for the elves. To start with, we had the 3 rings for the Elven Kings. Those weren't the first ones to be forged, but we also have the 7 dwarf rings, which those ones were probably the second to be forged, and the 9 rings for the mortal men were probably the first ones of those batch of 20 to be forged. And so it probably went 9. They were all forged for the elves. The 9 that they got, and they realized these don't work like we want them to. They forged the 7. The 7 didn't work like they wanted to, and so they distributed them. And then they forged the 3 after Sauron had been kicked out, or after Anatar had been kicked out. And then Sauron, being kicked out, used the same processes to forge his own, the One Ring, the Master Ring. And thereby he couldn't directly control the Elven Rings, but their fate was tied to the fate of the One Ring, because there was the same process used and taught by Sauron to Celebrimbor. So having them make the 3 elven rings as the first rings that they made doesn't really make sense. And that's kind of, it breaks lore again. Just another place to break lore. But then let's see. The last thought I have about the episode itself is the ring poem sung at the end doesn't work. So, 3 rings for the Elven Kings under the sky, 7 for the Dwarf Lords in their houses of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, etc. And it continues. They sing that, they set that poem to music, and it does not work. I don't know if it's the performer, or the tune, or what it is, or the fact that they repeat in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, in the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, and then they go into the next verse or something like that. Whatever the case is, it doesn't work. It doesn't hold the weight that even just a bland recitation of that poem holds. Somehow they managed to remove all the weight of that poem by putting it into this song here at the end, and I don't understand how that's possible. Maybe it's just based on the rest of the show and my thoughts on that show, and then I hear that and it just like, oh my goodness, another thing? And I don't know. So that song at the end was not good. So now I will say this. I knew that Halbrand was going to be Sauron from very early on in this episode. Well, I kind of suspected it. So, there's been theories about, oh, he's Sauron from the beginning. And I was definitely like, oh, there's a good chance that he's Sauron from the very beginning. But then at the end of the last episode, when they decided, so this is what happened. In the last episode, we see Halbrand. We see him talking to, 2 episodes ago, we see him talking to the Uruk guy, I can't think of his name, Adar. We see him talking to Adar, and Adar's like, who are you? And you don't remember me, and all this kind of stuff. And then we see Adar tell Galadriel that he sliced him up in half, killed him. And then we see in the end of the last episode that Halbrand has a huge gash in his chest somewhere. Not that it would kill him, but then he also, it makes no sense where and when he would have been hurt, because the characters found him that way. And so from that moment I was like, oh, he's gonna be Sauron, because we just established that Adar thinks he killed him by basically trying to cut him in half. And then along with that, we get Halbrand just appearing with a wound and having to go to Eregion, the elven healers, to be healed. And so then I'm like, okay, so he's gonna be Sauron more than likely. Either he's gonna be Sauron, or Sauron hasn't been introduced yet at all. And I don't think, I would have preferred that Sauron hadn't been introduced yet, because it makes no sense why they would need, lots of stuff don't make sense in this show, and I'm trying to finish this up. Anyways, so at that point I was pretty sure that Halbrand was gonna be Sauron, and I didn't really talk about that because that's kind of a hard thing to explain. But then we get into Eregion, and one of the first things he says is, he starts talking to Celebrimbor about smithing, and he talks about how you can combine metals to make an alloy, or you can add just a little bit of zinc into your iron and it makes a steel stronger than any iron, or a sword stronger than any, whatever he says. And he says specifically, it is a gift. And I'm like, I knew it. That line, it is a gift, or considered a gift, or whatever it is he said. Consider it more of a gift, I think, something along those lines. At that point, okay, Sauron, Anatar, the giver of gifts. And so I knew at that point with certainty that it was Sauron. And they still tried to hide it. Not really, but then they just keep trying to hide that reveal that he's Sauron, and slow build towards that reveal, and then when that reveal happens, you're like, I knew it. We knew it from at least last episode, probably from the first episode. And so it's just like, anyways, so then my thoughts afterwards that I wrote down last night and today before filming this, and that was, what was the point of the Mystics? Like, what do the Mystics add to anything? They were there to tell them that he was an Istari, which we all knew, even though that breaks lore, we all knew that he was going to be an Istari or a wizard. And what else were they there for? To destroy the Hutts? To kill Sadoc? What was the point of the Mystics existing in this show? Unless they're going to be the 3 of the Nazgul, in which case no, please no. Then I also wrote down, also slipped in the fact that Elrond broke his oath to Durin, but they never said it. You just pick it up from the context. So, we've never seen anything about Durin telling Gil-galad that they have Mithril. We never see Celebrimbor, although we can assume, but we never see Celebrimbor telling Gil-galad that there's Mithril. But we do see Gil-galad, Elrond, Galadriel, and Celebrimbor standing around anvil looking at this Mithril and talking about it, which implies that Elrond broke his oath, which to break an oath in Tolkien's works is one of the worst things you can possibly do. It's about the worst thing you can possibly do. And so to have him break his oath, even in this roundabout way that doesn't really, is kind of iffy if did he actually break it or did he just kind of like give the, which first off, by telling Celebrimbor about the Mithril, he broke his oath. And then by letting Celebrimbor tell Gil-galad and having that, it just like, this is a broken oath. There's no way around that. It is a broken oath because we never heard anything about Durin telling Elrond, it's okay, you can tell your people, that's fine. And then I also wrote down, also, why did Gil-galad have his spear with him there? So, Gil-galad's kingdom is in Lindon. He travels to Eregion. At this point, the orcs don't freely roam the lands. He has other people around him who would be his protectors. I find it kind of unlikely that he would carry his spear with him, not completely, but just the way that you see it, and he's just standing there, very regal, trying to leave, and he has his spear in his arm, and I'm just like, I don't buy it. I don't buy that you'd have your spear like that right here in this moment. It doesn't make sense. So, I don't know. That was kind of my last thought on the show is, and I'll have one more here in a second, but that was kind of the last thing that I wrote down about it. What do you mean by, or why does Gil-galad have a spear? I've already said that I like the look of his spear. I think it's a cool looking spear. Probably not what I would have done, but I think it's a cool looking spear. And so there is that. Anyways, that's just a very minor thing that I noticed. Again, I pick up on the minor things a lot because there's so many others who pick up on the big things, like the storyline, like the breaks of lore, like all these things, and I only mention them if I really find them repulsive. And this, so I tend to pick up on little things a lot more than other people do because, or at least I tend to bring them out in my discussions more than other people do. So that is where I will end my discussion on the Rings of Power finale as a whole. And I will make this one last comment, and that comment is that after I watched Rings of Power, I watched She-Hulk, which I have not been enjoying She-Hulk. I have not thought it was a good show. I thought there was some good things about it. I thought there was some good episodes. I think it was episode 4. I enjoyed an episode, the last that I kind of enjoyed a little bit, certain things about it. But as a whole, I haven't really been liking the show. I've just been watching it because it's could be a very important show for the rest of the MCU going forward, and so I want to keep up with that if I can. But so I watched the finale of She-Hulk after I watched the finale of Rings of Power, and the comment that I made was, I hate that She-Hulk finale was better than the Rings of Power one. A show that I haven't been enjoying with She-Hulk still manages to tell a better story in its finale than the Rings of Power does. And that's frustrating to no end. The Lord of the Rings, I mean, I like Marvel. Marvel is great. Marvel is one of my favorite IPs. The movies, I've kind of not been loving the movies since about the end of phase 4, phase 3, I guess. I haven't been loving the movies as much, just other than Eternals. That one, for some reason, worked really well for me. But it just kind of is rather disappointing. I like the comics, I like the movies, but they don't compare to Lord of the Rings. And so to have a Lord of the Rings property, an IP, or a project with the IP of Lord of the Rings on being utilized, and to have it be worse than a Marvel project, very disappointing to me. I mean, you can argue that the Hobbit movies are not great, but the Hobbit movies still tell a fun story. They're very fun movies. They more or less, I mean, they change a lot in the Hobbit book, and there's some lore tweaks and breaks and stuff like that, but it's nothing nearly as egregious as Rings of Power. And so I enjoy watching those movies because they're fun. There's probably specifically like the Captain America trilogy, those movies are probably better than the Hobbit movies. They're very different. And so there's moments in Marvel that could be more enjoyable or better than something with the Tolkien IP on it. To have She-Hulk, which has been a show that I haven't been enjoying, have a finale that is more enjoyable, that is a better written story, better written episode than anything in this one show, and especially its finale. That's hard. That's hard for me to deal with because it shouldn't be the case, ever. Tolkien is the best. Anyways, I've talked long enough. I need to continue on. I need to get this stuff edited and get it scheduled and out to you guys. So I will quit with that there, but I'm a little disheartened with this show. More than a little disheartened. I'm at the point now where I would rather there not be anything else made other than more books that are compilations of Tolkien's notes. Those are fine. I'll be happy to read those. But I don't want any more adaptations because I've just been disappointed with this one to a degree that is... I mean, fan films are something different. There's always something different with fan films. But this is not that. This was a high-budget, high-value production designed to be supplementary material to The Lord of the Rings, to The Silmarillion, to The Hobbit, to the Peter Jackson movies. And it wasn't good. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as I was expecting in many ways. And it was absolutely gorgeous. This last episode was stunning. Visually one of the best shows I've ever seen. It's got great music. Bear McCreary did a great job on the soundtrack. There's a lot of really cool stuff in this show, a lot of really good stuff in this show, and a lot of really bad stuff in this show. A lot of why was this made? I will have one more video at some point, maybe two, but at least one more video at some point talking about the future of this show and if they're going to continue it where based off of season 1 where I think they should go use going forward. That's all I've got to say. Rather disappointed. Rather frustrated. Thank you guys for watching Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday with adaptation stuff on Wednesdays. We have our social medias linked in the description down below. Let me know what you guys think of this episode, of the show as a whole. I want to hear people's thoughts. I'm not opposed to having my mind changed on the show, but it's going to be very hard for me to have my mind changed because I know what it could have been, and I have read lots of good stories. So to see, and I've watched lots of good stories, movies, TV shows, whatever it is, I've watched lots and I've read lots, and to see something that's not it's not good, or not great, rather just very excessive and mediocre, not too great. Anyways, we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching. Stay well.